While I was away on a business trip, my parents called to say they were giving my childhood room to my divorced sister. She needs it more than you, they said. When I questioned them, they screamed, tossed my belongings onto the street, and sent me a video of it, laughing like they'd won. I made one phone call. By the time I came home, they had lost everything. I've always been the quiet one in the family, the type who doesn't talk back, who helps when asked and never expects much in return. I moved out when I was 24 after landing my first big interior design project. It was a boutique hotel in Savannah, Georgia, and it became my springboard. Over the next 5 years, I built my name in the luxury design world, slowly and silently. But no matter how far I went, one thing stayed the same. I always considered my childhood room at my parents' home my anchor, my safe place, my escape. Mom and Dad never asked much about my work. They knew I was doing well, but they never really understood what that meant. My older sister Vanessa, on the other hand, was always the center of their world. She's 5 years older than me, divorced twice now, and constantly switching careers. One minute she's trying to open a skincare line, the next she wants to become a life coach. Nothing ever sticks. And no matter what, Mom and Dad always found a way to excuse it, to comfort her, to clean up the messes she left behind. It was a chilly Thursday afternoon when it happened. I was in Chicago for a hotel renovation project, walking back to my suite after a meeting, when I saw their names flash on my phone. I answered, expecting the usual check-in call. But the moment I heard Mom's voice, I knew something was off. "Jasmine," she said, her tone oddly firm. "We've decided that Vanessa will be moving into your room." I stopped walking. "What do you mean?" "You decided? She needs the space," Dad cut in. "She's going through a lot, and she's moving back in. You don't live here anymore, Jasmine. It's just sitting there." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You're giving away my room? Without even asking me?" "Don't be dramatic," Mom snapped. "You don't even use it. Vanessa needs it more than you do." I felt something rise in my chest, a tight, burning kind of pain. "You didn't think it was important to ask? To at least tell me before making a decision like this?" And then came the yelling. Both of them, accusing me of being selfish, ungrateful, dramatic. They said I was overreacting and that I should be more supportive of my sister. Then they hung up.
Just like that.
I stood frozen in the hallway of that hotel for a long time. Then, not even 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. It was a video. From Vanessa. At first, I didn't want to open it. But I did. And I wish I hadn't. My belongings, boxes of old books, framed photos, childhood keepsakes, were scattered on the front lawn. Dumped like trash. I watched as my favorite armchair was shoved onto the grass and rolled into the street. My sketchbooks tossed like junk mail. Vanessa's voice in the background, laughing as she directed movers where to put her things. I couldn't breathe. That night, I sat alone in my hotel room, staring at the ceiling, fists clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palms. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, quiet.
Calm.
But inside, something had cracked open. They thought I was still the same girl who would stay quiet, who would move aside without question. They had no idea. What they didn't know was that months before, while visiting for a weekend, I'd stumbled across something in Dad's study. A pile of unopened mail. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for a charger. But I saw it. A notice from the county. The house was on the verge of foreclosure. Unpaid property taxes. Missed loan payments. And it wasn't the first notice, either. I took a picture. Said nothing. Over the next few weeks, I dug deeper. I found out they'd taken out loans to help fund Vanessa's failed ventures. A huge chunk of their income had gone to bailing her out. And now the house, my childhood home, was on the line. I didn't confront them. Instead, I started making calls. Quietly. Strategically. I watched the auction schedule. I made arrangements. I used the money I'd saved from my design projects, nearly $150,000, and when the auction came, I bought the house. I bought the house my parents tried to throw me out of. I became the legal owner of 2048 Willow Lane without them ever knowing. I waited. I didn't tell anyone. Not until the moment was right. And that moment was coming soon. As my flight back to Savannah touched down, I looked out the window and whispered to myself, now it's my turn. By the time I pulled into the driveway, I had already informed my legal team. My lawyer, Danielle, was with me. We stepped onto the porch like we belonged there because we did. Inside, I could hear laughter. Vanessa's voice, Mom's humming. They were painting my walls, redecorating what used to be my space. I knocked once, then opened the door. Vanessa turned around, brush in hand.
Oh,
You're back. I looked around at the boxes, the fresh paint cans, my posters gone from the walls. Everyone living room.
now.
They blinked, confused but followed. Maybe it was something in my voice. Or the way Danielle stood beside me, silent but strong, briefcase in hand. We sat. I pulled out the envelope. Danielle opened it. And calmly, like we were in a boardroom, she said, as of March 12th, Jasmine Carter is the legal owner of this property. I watched their faces fall like dominoes. But this wasn't even the beginning. For a few seconds after Danielle spoke, nobody said a word. I could feel the silence press against my chest, thick and heavy. Vanessa blinked like she hadn't heard correctly. Mom opened her mouth, then closed it again. Dad just stared at the folder in Danielle's hand like it might explode. You're lying, Vanessa finally said, stepping forward. This is some kind of joke, right? No, I replied calmly. It's not a joke. I bought this house at the county auction last month. I'm the legal owner now. Mom looked at Dad, her face pale. Ronald, is this true? Is that even possible? Danielle handed them copies of the official documents. All fully legal. You received notice of foreclosure months ago. The house was auctioned after the outstanding debts weren't paid. Ms. Carter placed the winning bid, $147,000, and the sale was finalized 3 weeks ago. Dad sank into the armchair, like his legs gave out. I didn't think it would really happen, he said in a whisper. I thought we had more time. No, you ran out of time the moment you prioritized everything but responsibility, I said. My voice didn't rise.
It didn't need to.
And now, things are going to change. You bought our house? Mom's voice cracked. Your own parents' house? You mean the house you threw me out of? I raised an eyebrow. The room you handed to Vanessa without a second thought? The one you cleared out like it meant nothing to me. Vanessa stepped in again. Okay, so what now? You gonna throw us out? Really, Jasmine? I looked at her straight on. I should, but I'm not. I'm giving you a choice. If you want to live here, you'll sign a rental agreement. $1,000 per month, utilities included. If not, you have 10 days to move out. Dad's eyes widened. You're charging your own parents' rent? I'm treating you like the adults you are, like tenants. Because clearly, being family didn't matter when you made your decisions about me. I turned to Vanessa. And as for you, you laughed while my things were being thrown out. You posted it. Sent me a video like it was a game. That wasn't just disrespectful, it was cruel. I was upset, she shouted. I was going through a divorce, I needed space. We all go through things, I said. But that doesn't excuse stomping all over someone else's life. I'm done being the quiet one, the understanding one, the invisible one. This is my home now, and I decide how it's run. Mom was crying by then, holding her face in her hands. We didn't mean for it to go this far. We were just trying to help Vanessa. You always are. I cut in, the first hint of bitterness slipping into my tone. Always helping her. Even when it means hurting me. I was the one who helped with bills when I was still in college. I brought groceries, fixed things around the house, gave you money when you asked. But that never mattered, did it? Dad looked ashamed, but didn't speak. Vanessa just stood there, arms crossed, staring at the floor. I'll give you until tomorrow to decide, I said finally. Danielle will leave copies of the lease agreements. If you want to stay, sign them. If not, make plans to leave. I'll be back tomorrow to check in. Then I walked upstairs. Into my room, or what used to be mine. The walls were no longer lavender. Vanessa had painted them beige. My bookshelves were gone, replaced by some white shelf packed with crystals and candles. My reading chair had vanished. In its place sat a ring light and a yoga mat. I looked around slowly, then walked back downstairs.
One more thing, I said.
Everything in that room? Take it out. I expect it returned to its original condition. If you want to use a room, rent one of the others. Vanessa's face turned red. You're unbelievable. I smiled a little. Yes, I am. The next day, I didn't stay at the house. I booked a hotel nearby and spent the evening reviewing upcoming design projects, pretending I wasn't emotionally drained from the confrontation. I told myself I didn't care, but of course I did. This was still my family, and it hurt that they'd treated me like I was disposable. Danielle texted me the next afternoon. They signed. All three of them. I came back that evening to find Mom in the kitchen, quietly making dinner. Dad was in the garage fixing a broken cabinet door. Vanessa had retreated to the smaller guest room. Nothing was said. No grand apology. Just silence and tension. But they'd signed. Over the next week, I moved back into my room.
Slowly.
Methodically. My shelves were rebuilt, my chair returned, though it had scratches now, and the walls repainted by a local contractor I hired. I didn't ask them to help. They knew better than to offer. At first, they were stiff around me. Careful. But I didn't speak much, just laid down boundaries and followed the lease agreement like a professional. Rent was due on the 5th. Repairs had to be reported. No borrowing space without asking. Vanessa tried once to make a snide comment. Something about how I was acting like a landlord instead of a daughter. I am a landlord, I replied calmly. A good one. But if you break the lease, I'll handle it like I would with any tenant. Don't test me. She didn't say anything after that. Mom, surprisingly, started softening first. She began cooking my favorite meals again, quietly placing them in the fridge with sticky notes that said things like, "In case you're hungry." Dad offered to mow the lawn, fix a leaky pipe, even brought in my packages when I was out. And slowly, something shifted. They didn't complain about the rent. They paid it on time. They started asking before using shared spaces. They were starting to get it, not just the financial part, but the respect part. I didn't know yet where this was heading, or if it would last. But I knew one thing. I had changed everything. And I was just getting started. 3 weeks into the new arrangement, I started to see cracks in the roles my family used to play. Cracks that slowly let the light in. It was strange, waking up in my childhood room again, only now with the knowledge that I owned every inch of this house. The floorboards didn't creak the same. The walls didn't feel as comforting. It wasn't the same sanctuary I once escaped to. It was something new. A space reclaimed. A life rewritten. Vanessa, of course, didn't adjust easily. She sulked.
She stomped.
She rolled her eyes at every reminder that she was no longer entitled to everything. I gave her nothing to argue with. I kept things professional.
Cold even.
She tried to pay rent through an app once, Venmo, like we were splitting takeout. I declined it. Why was my payment rejected? She asked the next morning, standing in the kitchen like she owned the floor. Because the lease clearly states rent must be paid by check or direct transfer. No personal payment apps, I said, sipping my coffee without looking up. That's ridiculous. Who even uses checks anymore? Professional landlords do, I said calmly. You have until the end of today. After that, late fees apply. She muttered something under her breath and stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. An hour later, Dad showed up from the bank with a cashier's check. He handed it to me, his face unreadable. Just this once, he said gruffly. She needs to learn. She does, I said, taking the envelope. And so do you. That caught him off guard. He didn't respond, just gave a short nod and walked off. But something shifted after that. I think that moment, being the one handing over the money for Vanessa instead of defending her, made him realize how much he'd enabled her. And how much he'd ignored me. A few days later, I overheard a conversation between them from my room. The walls may have been repainted, but they still let sound through when voices were raised. What do you mean you won't co-sign? Vanessa's voice was shrill. I mean I won't do it, Vanessa, Dad replied. Not again. We're barely holding on as it is. I need this loan to get back on my feet. My coaching business was just getting started. No, he said firmly. We nearly lost the house because of you. You can't keep running to us every time you want to start over. I stood by my door, heart racing. I'd never heard him talk to her like that. We're lucky Jasmine stepped in when she did, he continued. You may not like how she did it, but she saved this house. Without her, we'd be out on the street. She's holding it over our heads, Vanessa snapped. She's charging us below market rent and giving us the chance to fix our mistakes, Mom's voice chimed in. That's more than most people would do. I went back to my desk, sat down, and smiled to myself. Later that night, Vanessa knocked on my door. It was the first time she'd done that since I'd returned. Can we talk? She asked, hesitating in the hallway. I motioned to the chair across from my desk. She sat, fidgeting with the sleeve of her hoodie. I've been thinking, she said, about everything, about how I always jumped into stuff without really knowing what I was doing. And maybe I could use some advice. Advice? I raised an eyebrow. On how to actually make something work, she said. You built all this while we weren't even paying attention. Every business I tried failed in 6 months. You somehow own a house and have money saved and a real career. I want to learn how to do that. The right way. It was the first time Vanessa had ever admitted that I knew something she didn't. That she needed help. Not pity. Not money. Help. What kind of advice are you looking for? I asked. How to build a real business plan. How to start small. Like you did. I closed my laptop. You do the work. No shortcuts. No asking Mom and Dad for anything. You want to build something real. You do it from the ground up. She nodded slowly. Like you did. Exactly. The next morning, she joined me in my office, what used to be just my bedroom, carrying a notebook and pen. She asked questions, took notes. I showed her how I'd started with small contracts. How I'd reinvested everything I earned. How I tracked every penny. No fancy loans. No borrowed money. Just planning and persistence. Over the next 2 weeks, she showed up every morning. Sometimes late, sometimes distracted, but she came. Mom and Dad started sitting in on the sessions too, pretending to just pass by, then staying longer. Eventually, they brought their own notebooks. I wasn't just helping Vanessa. I was helping them all. One night, Mom knocked on my door, looking awkward in the doorway. She glanced around like she was seeing my room for the first time again. I've been thinking, she said, about everything. About how we treated you compared to Vanessa. And I'm sorry. I didn't say anything, just waited. We got so caught up in trying to help her that we didn't even notice how much we were taking from you. You never asked for anything, so we assumed you didn't need anything. I didn't need your support, I said. But I deserved your respect. She nodded, eyes filling with tears. You did. You do. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't some movie moment. But it was real. It was honest. By the end of the month, Vanessa presented her first real business plan. Not a wellness brand or a coaching fantasy, but something practical, helping small businesses build and manage their online presence. A real market, real services, real projections. I'd like to rent a small office space, she said. Not here. A proper place. Something small to start. How do you plan to fund it? Dad asked, already reaching for his wallet. With my own savings, she said, holding up a folder. I've been working part-time at the coffee shop and saving every bit. It's not much, but it's a start. A real start. I lean back in my chair. I might know of a small commercial space. One of my properties. Rent's fair. Location's decent. She hesitated. You're not offering it just because I'm your sister, right? No, I said. I'm offering because you finally have a solid plan and you're doing it the right way. You'll sign a lease like anyone else. She smiled. I'd like that. And for the first time, I smiled too, not because I'd won, but because things were finally starting to make sense. 6 months later, I stood in the doorway of Vanessa's new office, her very own space in one of my small commercial properties. It was nothing fancy, just a 2-room suite on the edge of town, but she'd made it hers. There were no crystals, no vision boards, no dramatic color schemes. Just a clean desk, a laptop, a filing cabinet, and a small sign on the glass door, Carter Digital Solutions. "What do you think?" she asked, adjusting her monitor for the third time. "Professional enough?" "Very," I said, watching her move around with a new kind of focus. She looked different. Simpler.
Smarter.
She wore business casual now instead of trying to look like an influencer. She carried a planner. She actually used it. "My first client meeting is tomorrow," she added, her voice a mix of nerves and pride. 3 local businesses already signed contracts. Small ones, but it's a start. "A real start," I nodded. Vanessa looked at me with something I hadn't seen in her eyes before: respect. Not forced or awkward, just real. And I gave it back. Because despite everything that happened, she'd done the work. She was changing.
Slowly, yes, but genuinely.
She reached into her bag and pulled out a sealed envelope. "And here's this month's rent. Check, not Venmo." I smiled and took it. Good. I was about to issue a notice. We both laughed, and for once, it wasn't tense. It wasn't strained. It just felt normal. On the way back to the house, I thought about what had changed. And what hadn't. Mom and Dad had started taking business classes at the local community college. Mom was actually enjoying it, said she discovered a talent for bookkeeping. Dad wasn't quite as enthusiastic, but he stuck with it. He even showed me one of his assignments last week, proud like a kid bringing home a school project. The biggest shift, though, was in how they treated me. They stopped calling me selfish. Stopped assuming I'd always make room for everyone else. They asked before using anything that belonged to me. They cleaned up after themselves. They paid rent on time. Every month. And more than that, they started including me in conversations, not as the background daughter, but as someone with authority. Someone they could learn from. At dinner that night, our new weekly tradition, Mom made my favorite, lemon garlic pasta, without even asking. Dad brought out a bottle of wine I liked. We ate around the same table we always had, but something was different now. The way they looked at me, the way they spoke, it wasn't like before. I wasn't the backup plan anymore. "My professor used one of your property strategies as a case study," Dad said, grinning as he poured himself another glass. "Didn't tell him it was for my daughter, though. Just presented it like a genius idea I found online." I laughed. "And what did he say?" "Said it was brilliant. Called it a masterclass in strategic development." Mom reached over and patted my hand. "We should have seen it sooner. What you were building. Who you were becoming." "Maybe," I said softly, "but you see it now." After dinner, I pulled out a folder. "I've been thinking about the house. You've shown you're willing to take responsibility, to respect boundaries. I want to offer you both a rent-to-own agreement." They froze, eyes wide. "Really?" Mom asked. "It's fair," I said. "You'll keep paying, but part of it will go toward eventual ownership. If you complete the full term, the title transfers to both of you." Dad looked at the document like it was written in gold. "You'd really do that for us? After everything?" "I'm not doing it for free," I said. "You'll earn it. The same way I did. But yes, I believe you've changed. And that deserves a chance." Vanessa, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "I've been thinking, too. Maybe I should start looking for my own place. Start building something that's really mine. Like you did, Jasmine." Mom's face twitched, unsure whether to protest or support her. But Vanessa kept going. "I've learned a lot. I've made mistakes. But I want to do better. And now I finally think I can." I didn't say anything right away. I just looked at her. Really looked at her. And for the first time, I didn't see the sister who had pushed me aside. I saw someone standing on her own for once. Later that night, I sat in my room that had once been stolen, repainted, and reclaimed. The window view hadn't changed, but everything else had. The walls weren't just freshly painted, they held new meaning. This wasn't just my childhood bedroom. It was where I had drawn a line, where I had found my strength, where I had set the rules and finally been heard. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Vanessa. "Thank you. Not just for the space.
For showing me a better way.
I stared at the message for a long time, then replied, "You did the work. I just showed you the door." Downstairs, I could hear Mom and Dad cleaning the kitchen together, talking about class projects and budgeting apps. Vanessa was probably in her room, prepping for her client meeting. Everything had changed. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but in small, meaningful steps. Real growth. Real healing. The betrayal hadn't broken me. It had built me. And in the end, I didn't get revenge through anger. I got it through power, through peace, and through proof that even the quiet ones can change everything. This wasn't the ending I expected, but it was the one we all needed.